Welcome to Nerd News Now for August 22nd, 2018. I'm Mark. If the Revenge of the Nerds film series taught us anything, it's that geeks and sports do not mix. But wait a minute, the geeks were playing sports and they're really good at the end and they beat the athletes. So I guess it proved to us that geeks and sports do mix. Maybe that's why there's so many promotions going on at MLB and NBA involving stuff like Game of Thrones, Star Wars, and Disney. We'll discuss that. Also, The Punisher's being rebooted for the 11th time. Is that a good idea? Do you care? Also, what famous TV sleuth is coming back to the limited series on Hulu? We'll talk about that and more on Nerd News Now. So let's get right into it. I'm here with Ashford. This is Mark. Nerd News Now for all your news about geek and nerd culture. Ashford, we're going to do something that we'll probably never be able to do again on this show, but we're going to open this up all about sports. Specifically, though, how sports and geek culture has kind of like synchronized over the last few years. Now, when we were young, that didn't really happen, right? But maybe the first time was maybe Shaq?
Yeah, as far as a global pop type conquest, yeah, because remember, he was in the Shazam movie. Not to be confused with what's coming out in April of 2019.
Yeah, and he had the big Superman tattoo. He was Superman, the Man of Steel. That's kind of an easy nickname to grab, but it was still a big thing. I'm sure DC Comics appreciated it and fans of all the Superman movies, but it kind of showed you like, oh, wait a minute, this is like this big hulking athlete and he's into this stuff. So it kind of opened that a little bit. But what we're going to talk about this weekend is Players Weekend in Major League Baseball. Now, in Players Weekend, they get to wear brightly colored cleats without worried about getting fines, as happens in other sports. They get to wear different equipment. They get to give shout-outs to their friends and family and organizations they believe in. They also get to wear jerseys with their nicknames on the back. For example, keeping it local, Charlie Morton for the Astros, he has, a good grounder pitch, right? So he's going with Ground Chuck. Now, the biggest one to me, for the first time in the history of, as far as I know, American sports, but definitely Major League Baseball, Brad Boxberger, a pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, he's going to have emojis. Emojis.
Oh, wow.
Instead of a name, it's going to be a box and a burger.
This is the beginning of Idiocracy.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
And, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's super fun. But then within the super funness, you can buy the jerseys for $80. So is it a cash grab? I don't know. Yeah. But also, of note, we're going to swing this back to comics within sports, like I said. Adam Engel of the White Sox, he has a cool one. His nickname is the Man of Steel, S-T-A-L. Wow. He is a huge Superman fan and even named one of his daughters Clark.
Oh, wow.
So you talk about, man, that is awesome. The ability that a Major League Baseball player can have such a love and passion for the character Clark Kent. He's good at stealing bases, and then he has Man of Steel. So that's fun. And then within that, the Astros are really big here, having won the World Series. And so I always kind of keep watch over what they're doing and also just what the rest of Major League Baseball is doing. And over the last few years, they've had a lot of promotional nights that have been about Marvel Comics, Disney princesses, and even Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So I got this shirt last year. You don't watch Game of Thrones.
No, I don't.
So you're the one person that doesn't.
I don't.
But they have a slogan, winter is coming. And of course,
I know that one.
And baseball playoffs, they have playoffs in October.
Mr. October.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson, Mr. October. So I got this shirt as kind of a little cross promotion. October is coming. It's got Jon Snow's sword on it, referencing the fact that the Astros were on the way to the playoffs, hopefully again this year, if they can keep the Oakland A's off their heels. But what do you think about that? Because, this year the Astros had a really cool promotion where Marvel Comics came in. They had a limited print. They got Marvel artists to draw. They got local artists to come in and sketch pictures for people. What do you think about that synergy that's going on? And then today, actually, this is news. The New York Jets have also they're also going to team up with Marvel and have a Hulk Day.
Oh
Basically,
wow.
they're going to have a green out, so all the fans are going to want to wear green that day, and it's going to be a Hulk bobblehead, a limited Hulk versus Thor print.
Oh
So
wow.
they're really taking it to the next level as far as that goes.
I think it's beautiful, and I got to be an old man about this. As far as human beings, it's only so much our brains can consume. So it'll be something where we might make the same mistake of something that happened 5 years ago. And some of us might remember, like, wait a minute, that happened 5 years ago and that was bad. Why are we doing it again? Well, we just can't hold that much information. And I can't stress this enough. There used to be a time where you had to hide your fandom. Like, you had to hide it in shame. So, like, I remember, like, as early as 2003, I walked around with a Batman T-shirt, and whenever like Dark Knight came out, there would be people that would go like, "Hey, that was a good movie. That was a good movie, right?" I mean, Batman Begins. They would go, "That's a good movie." If I wear a Batman shirt now, no one's gonna say anything to me because it's commonplace. Like wearing a Batman shirt, that's like brushing your teeth. Like it's not a big deal. But as 2003 for young people, that's a long time ago. But for us, that's like just a blink of the eye. And I just remember just wearing a simple, like you would think maybe wearing something more obscure would get someone's attention. A Batman shirt was making people walk up to me. If I wear a Batman shirt, no one's gonna walk up to me now. So I just the marriage between sports and comics and geekdom and Marvel comics is beautiful, but at the same time, this was bound to happen because, like, okay, when you're into geek type culture, you geek out on it, right? Well, like if you're into college sports and you have a 3 month old baby and you put the Texas A&M on them, that's geekdom type culture. When you're debating on like which coach was the best for that college sports team, that's geekdom type culture. When you're painting your stomach, you take your shirt off and you paint your stomach the colors of the Philadelphia Eagles, that's geek culture. So like, when the dude in the sports thing, when he's doing it, like, oh, that's whatever. And then maybe I might wear a Batman wristband and it's like, dude, what is that about? No, it's the same type of process. It's like being addicted to sugar, being addicted to maybe an illegal drug. As far as the brain is concerned and like the addiction part of it is coming from the same place. So your fandom for sports, your fandom for geek culture, it's a marriage. So this is bound to happen.
And speaking of college football, Marvel and ESPN are obviously owned by the same company, Disney. But
Disney.
they did a really cool cross promotion. Speaking of rivalries and everything, coming up college football season, they're promoting all these big games between all these rival teams. One of them was LSU versus Miami, and they actually commissioned Marvel artists to go back and recreate famous covers. Now, unfortunately, these are only digital, but if you go search ESPN, Marvel, NCAA, you'll be able to find them. But my favorite was LSU versus Miami. It was a recreation of, I believe, issue 29 of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And it was awesome. But it's just another way to get people pumped up. They put it out on Twitter. People were like, hey, look at the representation of my team, of my mascot. I mean, they had a really cool one that was an homage to Iron Man fighting Thor. And just, it's awesome. And you don't need a whole lot to get college football fans started. You know that.
Right.
But it's just a really cool cross promotion that they're doing because their company, can work together in that way and put that out there. But just really cool stuff. And then finally, just to kind of wrap this up, I remember, going back to Superman. I remember, I think it's like in the '09 or 2010 slam dunk contest. Remember when the year before Dwight Howard had come out as Superman, in full cape,
Yeah.
dressed like Clark Kent when the phone booth came out, full Superman, did a crazy dunk from the free throw line. But then the following year, he was a really good sport, and he put on the cape again. But Nate Robinson, who was like at least a foot shorter than him, right? He came out with a green kryptonite ball, green kryptonite shoes, and dunked over him.
Wow.
So at that point, I should have known, okay, wait, this is totally acceptable. Now, Batman and Superman are a little bit different, but when you get into all this stuff like I can't believe like most of the MLB teams had a Game of Thrones night,
Yeah.
and that you can get a Jedi Council bobblehead set, from the Astros on Star Wars night. But it's just really really cool stuff. Sticking with the theme of comics, so this week Matthew Rosenberg for Marvel is going to be scripting the new Punisher series. Number one comes out today. New comics every Wednesday. That's probably the biggest comic from this week. Now this has been rebooted. This is volume 11. Now, for people that don't know, yes, reboots do happen, but like Batman and Superman, for example, even with all the stuff they've done in the last 10 years, this is really what volume 3 of each of those. I mean, they always go back when it's approaching a milestone number and kind of undo it to where it doesn't matter. But what do you think about 11 different incarnations of the Punisher? Is that a character that just doesn't work, or he works in short spurts and only certain parts of time? What do you think?
I'm so sorry. There's a podcast I listened to about the Punisher. I don't remember the name, but the Punisher, he's born out of, I'm an ex-Vietnam vet.
Yeah.
So I think there's sometimes where there's certain nuances and there's certain type of, I don't know, ideas where a character is built. And so think Vietnam, right? Now we're in 2018. So it's like, all right, it doesn't make sense that he's 40 and an ex-Vietnam vet. So, okay, we got to make him where he's maybe a Desert Storm vet. Maybe he's I don't know, like just a global threat type vet. And it's like, would he have those same type of characteristics not being a Vietnam vet? So that might be one of those characters like Ghost Rider, where it's like, we're trying to figure out what type of story do we want to tell with this character? How do we want him to come off? And it might be just the trouble of, does that character make sense in 2018? So like ex-Vietnam vet, we kind of got, all right, yeah, you're shell shocked, you're this. Does that translate with you're a vet from 2000 and you want to go around and shoot up? Do we interpret it the same way?
It's funny that you mentioned Ghost Rider because they've actually reimagined him as Cosmic Ghost Rider from the pages of Donny Cates' run on Thanos. But I think, I think these are cool characters. I think it works. And they did give him a really good update via Netflix on the TV series on Netflix featuring John Barenthal. They updated, his military history. The character still works. I think it's good. It's got to be frustrating if you're a huge fan of the Punisher. You can't collect issues 1 through 100 because they make like 12.
Yeah.
And so you know how it is. Like, but even if a series is ongoing, you might have a new artist every 10 issues, a new writer every 5.
But as far as like mental health and a character, that's more relevant than ever.
It is.
So that is something to bring up. Actually, that character, even if it's reimagined, you're tired of it. Man, he actually makes a lot of sense today.
I am looking forward to. Rosenberg's been doing a lot of good stuff for Marvel. Now, this book actually came out last week, but now that Justice League, which is the big anchor for DC, that's their flagship. It has been for, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. What do you think now that that's through issue number 6? Scott Snyder's doing a whole lot of stuff. What do you think of that so far?
And I don't read a lot of Justice League. I prefer Justice Society of America. It's more family, like first family, Fantastic Four. And I think Justice League is more of like a clubhouse. And I have issues with actually believing that Batman's a full-time member when he has 56 other books. And you also know how I think about, like, as far as if you're going to do a DC crossover, why do a DC big event when you got Justice League? That should be the event itself.
Yeah.
And I've read the first 6 issues by Scott Snyder, and I really loved his Batman Court of Owls. I thought it was so great that I didn't like anything else from him because I thought nothing else could top it. And right now, what he's writing for Justice League, and it's doing the whole Legion of Doom, which I'm not a big fan of, but I notice like if you're a person of a certain age and you grew up with that Justice League Hall of Fame or whatever, the Hall of Justice, that's a big deal.
And I think people love villains. So if villains are well done, and if they spent time being looked at like he's doing what every fourth or fifth issue, I think people are really into that part.
I'm gonna
too.
tell you something. So far, and it's always great to start beginnings. It's very well written. Like it seems like this is worth your time. If it's a bi-monthly book, it's worth your money, and quality is put in it. And when you do these bi-monthly books, you have to have two artists, and it doesn't seem like a jump cut. Like it doesn't seem abrupt. So I like it so far. We'll see where it goes. And it seems eventiness, as far as if you tell a Justice League story and you're not really motivated, it could just seem like, okay, this is just meandering. This seemed like a big deal.
I mean, it is, to use another sports reference from the previous topic. It's like the Yankees. So it's like kind of you either love it, you hate it, but they always have the biggest stars. They might not always be utilized well. They might not be having a great run, but at the end of the day, it's Justice League. It's just like Marvel and the Avengers. Is there anything else to note that you're following right now?
And I want to add one more thing about Justice League. And they have Hawk Girl, so I'm happy about that. Right now, I'm reading Mr. Miracle. It's a 12-part maxi series, and that's a cool book because let's say you don't know anything about Mr. Miracle. Let's say you don't know anything about Jack Kirby's Fourth World that DC engulfed back in 1970. Perfect. You don't need to know anything about it. It has this Game of Thrones type vibe to it, but the way it's being written, the artist is Mitch Jarrett's. It's written like it's an indie book deconstructing a superhero type idea. So when I'm reading the book, I can't tell, am I reading genius? Is it someone making fun of the genre? Or is this like the next wave? And that's always a good thing where you're like, I'm confused. Is this good or is my chain getting yanked? So I highly recommend Mr. Miracle. If you know something about it, great. If you don't know anything about Mr. Miracle, even better, because this is a good jumping on point.
And surprisingly enough, he and a lot of those characters, the Fourth World was created by
Jack
none other
Kirby.
than Marvel's Jack Kirby. I mean,
Yes.
that's what he's known for. So it's just very interesting that that's still relevant in the DC universe from such a Marvel icon. Now, sticking with comics, but in digital form, Deadpool 2 came out yesterday on Blu-ray. It's available now. Target had a really funny promotion package with that where they have a not for kids book, and it's like a little golden book of Deadpool. And so I found that to be hilarious. Now, did you see Deadpool 2?
Not 2. I saw part 1. I still haven't seen part 2.
Well, I can tell you this. It is a fantastic continuation. I love what Ryan Reynolds is doing. Why do you think that that's such a great movie series as far as like he's able to bring that all the comic goodness to the big screen? Do you think that he's just trying to make amends for what happened in Wolverine Origins to the Deadpool character? Maybe he's being given more creative control? Or do you think just people really gravitate towards that goofy character?
If you follow Ryan Reynolds all the way back to, not Zoe Duncan, Jack and Jane, but Mike, Jack, and a pizza place, what was that called?
2 girls, a guy, and a pizza
Yeah,
place.
2 guys, a girl, and a pizza place. For all you people that like Ryan Reynolds, go back and watch that show that came out in the late 90s. He has been auditioning for this Deadpool character his whole career. That's why this thing is wonderful. And if you go back and you watch Blade 3, he was auditioning for this role then. It's just, Ryan Reynolds is awesome. And that's why this movie is awesome.
So that's Deadpool 2, available on Blu-ray now. Now, if you love, like us, all things to do with comics and movies and sci-fi, be sure to check out the Fandemic Tours coming to Houston September 14th through 16th at the NRG Center. Be sure and check that out. And we'll be right back after this.
Football season is here, and Woodlands Online Sports is back better than ever. Watch all the action on KVQT 21 Houston and woodlandsonline.com.
For home repairs, call John Moore, where quality is guaranteed. If the problem returns, so will we. No extra charge.
Call John, get more. 730-2525.
Hey, welcome back to Nerd News Now for Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018. So, Ashford, moving to some TV news. This just broke yesterday. Veronica Mars is coming back. Veronica Mars was a high school detective played by Kristen Bell, who is just so awesome.
She's
and
cool.
she is cool. She's married in real life to Dax Shepard. Speaking of Idiocracy, Veronica Mars is a beloved character. Back before WB was CW, it was WB, and Veronica Mars was on there. It was an awesome series, definitely like a mixture of comedy and drama, and people just really gravitate to that show. Now, did you ever watch it?
I didn't. I've never seen Veronica Mars. I've heard a lot about it.
Now, the thing about her is that she was so good as that character, and the creative team just put so much into it. It was on the air for about 3 seasons. It was eventually canceled, but then they're one of the first people who did like the Kickstarter kind of out of nowhere, where it almost immediately was funded. They were asking for $2 million to do a movie. They got $6 million, so more than enough.
Wow.
The fan base was there. They brought it back. There was a movie. It kind of continued where the series had been going. Now, I bring this up because this is a big trend. I mean, we've had, going back a couple years, like Full House came back as Fuller House. Roseanne came back. Will and Grace came back. What do you think about this current trend?
Listen, this current trend makes sense. It's better than Hollywood going, you know what? We have this script. This sounds like Die Hard. Let's just make Die Hard Part 10. Like, okay, like, wait a minute, this script sounds like Catwoman. Let's just make a Catwoman, put Halle Berry in it. But doing a continuation, getting the old characters back, like in the one that I've watched, is Girl Meets World. It's perfect because, especially like if it's one of those shows where it's they have a big fan base that's watching those shows still. You have the 40, 30-somethings where we don't have to give up our childhood. We can go to the Astros game on Star Wars night where I have the Astros shirt plus Star Wars. So you have that base. Oh, and I have children. So the children want to see the younger generation. You know me, I love legacies. So like there was a show called Gidget where they did a remake and Sally Fields wasn't in it. It was a whole new cast, but I loved it. And then Leave It to Beaver, they did a return back in the 80s, and they had the original cast. And like the character that played Eddie Haskell, they found some actor, and he acted just like him. It's beautiful to me, so I love it.
And, you know, there's a big trend, and Murphy Brown is a show that's been gone. It's been gone a long time.
Yes.
But now in today's climate, with fake news and all that, I think it's very important for that to come back, and has a very strong female lead.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Murphy Brown, relevant because it's about news. Okay. Roseanne, I think like at the very beginning of that, like, okay, let's talk about how we're going to divide the pills, how we're going to pay for it. I can't retire comfortably, so I got to Uber. That makes sense. Fuller House, we live in San Francisco. Remember back in the day it wasn't a big deal. Now we can't afford to live here. No, this is beautiful because even though it's a sitcom, you're touching on things. What about One Day at a Time?
Now
What's the premise to that?
Okay, so now that is an old Norman Lear classic, and that one's different than the one we've been talking about. That's an actual reboot, but like you say, it fits into modern times.
Yes.
It's about a woman trying to raise her kids. Her mother is there, and it's like we have to make this work in this economy with all this stuff. We're in this apartment, so it's. Now, that's different because it's a whole new generation, whole new cast, no legacy characters. And that's a big difference between a reboot and a relaunch. Like some people get very adamant, and speaking of people getting adamant, they're going to remake Buffy, like it's going to happen. However, a lot of people are just like, and I think you're going to love this part, but like, hey, Sarah Michelle Gellar was in the midst during that series of constructing an army to fight all these Draculas, right? Why can't you just have one of the people that was, in that army, and there's multiple Slayers? Why can't there just be a new Slayer?
Gotcha.
Because the premise is is that there's a young Slayer, but like why can't she mentor that young Slayer, and why can't there be other characters that pop in and pop out? Like it doesn't need to be a reboot, and I think we talked about this last time with Ghostbusters, where it's just like if you would just have one Ghostbuster pop up and hand the keys over, you're good. Like that's what most people want. But so with all that, I just think Buffy's gonna have fans, but I think you should probably try to cater to those fans at first, because if you do, they will go to war for you on Twitter, and if you don't, they might go to war against you. Now, speaking on that topic, Seinfeld, that might be a show they're kind of talking about. I know you're big on that. You do a podcast.
The Four Who Rule
and the
on
Four Who Rule.
RideOnNetwork.com.
Now, besides that, is there anything that you would love or would hate to see rebooted? Or I'll even let you talk about that.
So wait a minute. Okay, now talk to me about the Seinfeld thing. What's going on there?
Well, they're in talks to possibly do more episodes.
So, but the original cast.
Original cast.
Okay, so that's cool.
That would be a relaunching.
Okay, so that'd be cool because if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, they had a pseudo reunion on that. But having a Seinfeld come back, that's perfect because New York has changed.
Now, see, that was more rumors.
Okay.
I know that would be one where people would be kind of like on edge about. Frasier's another one where allegedly Kelsey Grammer's having meetings with CBS. In talks.
Yeah.
But the thing is, people are like, wait a minute, people still want me as this character? Like, yeah, they do.
Right. And I want to say one thing about One Day at a Time. When I was a kid, I was like, what is this? What's the big, what is... I didn't realize at the time it was taboo that she was divorced, raising children. So, like, you got to... That's why I'm saying, like, as far as Punisher, there's certain things in there where, because it's of its time, maybe it's losing that. So, like, now, divorce is kind of common. Back then, it was... When that happened, it was a stigma behind it. So that was the premise of the show. So if you watch it now, you might think, well, what's the big deal? Just like if a 20-something, if they watch Pulp Fiction, they might go, what's the big deal about Pulp Fiction? Well, nothing was like that at the time, so it was a big deal.
Yeah. And moving on to movie news now. Danny Boyle, will not be directing James Bond. Now, this is a surprise. He's a beloved director. He was obviously most famous for Trainspotting, but he won some Academy Awards. He's a big time name, and he's really into James Bond. Like, he actually used Daniel Craig as James Bond in the ceremonies for the games when they were in 2012 in London. So kind of comes a little bit as a shock. Now, there's really no news as to who might replace him. However, this is going to be the 25th Bond film. Now, I watched Skyfall a few years back. It was awesome. Like, I really like the tone of it. I like Daniel Craig. Do you think it's time for him to move on?
Okay, well, one, if Daniel Craig wants to continue to do it, go for it. Full disclosure, his movies, they were the first ones I've ever seen in their entirety. Don't hate me, I'm sorry. I mean, I guess, if he wants to stick around, are you a Bond person? I'm
not really a Bond person. I
appreciate the franchise. I do. I respect the franchise.
I do
I'm
too.
I'm just saying.
I do too. I'll tell you what would get me on board is if, and a lot of people are saying this right now, is if Idris Elba. If Idris Elba was cast as Bond, I think that would be huge. Do you have any thoughts on that?
What's the guy? Trevor Noel, the guy that does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trevor Noel on Comedy Central.
Yeah, he has a joke about like James Bond is a spy from Scotland. There's not that many people of color in Scotland, so as a spy you need to blend in. He would have a hard time blending in. No, but as far as like Idris Elba being James Bond, he would rock it. He would rock.
I mean, that's Stringer Bell. Like to me, he could do anything. Now, how about going a completely different route? Do you think they would be ready for a Jane Bond, first woman? I don't know if that's what they would call it or not, but you had Jane Bond. Because I saw, to me, it's like another British institution is Doctor Who.
Yeah.
They're ready. We're going. It's happening. I guess whether you're ready or not as a fan, that's happening. 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think just make a different spy movie featuring one?
Okay, I think Daniel Craig himself was a rapid departure. He was rugged. His tie, like he looked beaten up. Like all the other James Bonds, they would be smooth. He looked worn and beaten. So I think that was a rapid departure itself. So I think having a woman as James Bond or Jane Bond, to me, I think as long as the capers are good and it's smooth and slick, me personally, I don't care. And then with Doctor Who being a woman, if you go back and you watch a lot of Doctor Who over the years, the changes are so different all the time. Like from the first Doctor to the fifth Doctor, being a woman, that's just another change. You know?
Yeah, we'll see. I'll tell you
Yeah.
this: I saw Charlize Theron as Atomic Blonde, and if they would have called that like Atomic Bond, hey, it would have been awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I wanted to wrap up. We would be remiss if we did not mention the passing of a pop culture icon. Last week, Aretha Franklin passed away at the age of 76. Now, I don't know about you, Ashford, but like that to me, I always think of that scene where she was saying, "Think, you better think," in Blues Brothers. That it was awesome. Do you have any thoughts on Miss Franklin?
It's really scary as we move forward, and like we were talking about reboots, and should you touch something if it's sacred from the past? And it's sad that Aretha Franklin passed away, of course, but it's just that we're losing those old voices, So, and in 2016, there were a lot of pop celebrities that passed away, because as far as for us, pop culture kind of started in 1950. So we're getting to the point where we're going to lose those voices. So there's a lot of people today, they're influenced by, if they're not influenced by Aretha Franklin, they're influenced by a person that was influenced by a person that was influenced by Aretha Franklin. So we're losing recipes.
And just to tie this all together, we were talking about sitcom relaunches. Murphy Brown, she was on an episode of Murphy Brown. YouTube it. It's awesome. That's all the time we have for today on Nerd News Now. For Ashford, I'm Mark. Join us next time.
Respect.